Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi praises Gambia's support of the One China policy. Egypt reinforces security ahead of Coptic Christmas celebrations. And we update you on the anxiety building up in DR Congo amid a delay in presidential poll results. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme, we look at the economic impact of the US government shutdown and the inspirational accomplishments of a young writer in Tunisia. We begin in West Africa. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is now in Gambia for his traditional New Year tour in Africa. Calling China his country's most important partner, Gambian President Adama Barrow has vowed to build closer bilateral ties. Wang expressed appreciation for Gambia's reaffirmed stance on the One China policy and China's willingness to build mutual trust with the West African country. He said the two sides should firmly support each other on issues concerning their respective core interests. On Friday, Wang Yi was in Burkina Faso, which re-established relations with Beijing in May after cutting ties with Taiwan. Wang is now heading to Senegal, the last leg of his four-nation New Year tour in Africa. Well, we are now joined by Robert Nagila to give us some more insight into Foreign Minister Wang Yi's West African tour. Robert, Wang Yi is continuing with his visit to West Africa. What are the highlights from his tour of Gambia?
Absolutely, Karen. He's due here in the next hour or so. But he arrived in Gambia on the 5th. That was on Saturday, and briefly met with the foreign minister before having bilateral talks with the president of Gambia. Now, this was the first visit by a Chinese foreign minister to Gambia since the restoration of diplomatic ties between China and Gambia in 2016. And Gambia's president made it very clear that his country would support China's stance at the United Nations and on other multilateral issues. On his part, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi thanked Ghana for its support and said that thanked Ghana for its support on the One China policy, and said that the visit was about building mutual trust. But it was actually more about strengthening bilateral ties and diplomatic ties as well. We know that Gambia's president had visited China twice in 2017, and this visit by the Chinese foreign minister was more of a reciprocation, an invitation extended to him by Gambia's foreign minister last year. Now, we know that several agreements were also signed between the two parties, and in the coming hours we will get more details what sort of agreements were signed and what impact it will have on the relationship of the two countries, China and Gambia. Karen?
Okay, so that was Gambia. And Robert, the Chinese foreign minister is winding up his tour of Africa in Senegal. What should we expect from his visit there?
Absolutely. As I said, we expect him to arrive within the hour from Gambia. On his arrival, he will hold scheduled talks with the foreign minister before meeting the president here in Dakar, the capital of Senegal. Now, this visit is very important for a number of reasons. One, in 2020, Senegal is due to host the FOCAC summit, the second country in Africa to do so after South Africa in 2015. You will also recall that in 2017, during President Xi Jinping's visit to Senegal, the country had applied to be part of the Belt and Road Initiative, and that was accepted. So they are working. That will also be part of the scheduled talks that Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi will hold with Senegal's president. There will also be discussions on other bilateral issues, including trade, because China is Senegal's second largest trading partner. So we're expecting quite a bit on this particular visit. A lot of the focus will be on FOCAC, of course, but I also expect a lot of agreements to be signed between the two, especially on infrastructure development, agriculture, finance, and so on. Karen.
Okay, thank you very much. That was Robert Nagila there on Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's West Africa tour. We are now turning to Egypt, to North Africa. An Egyptian police officer has been killed while attempting to defuse a bomb found outside a Coptic Christian church. Security forces said the device was one of two found inside a bag on a nearby rooftop. Two other policemen and an onlooker were also injured when the device exploded. The attack comes ahead of Egypt's Christian celebration of the Coptic Christmas. So far, no group has claimed responsibility. However, Islamist insurgents have previously carried out attacks on churches. Well, we are now going live to CGTN correspondent Adel Al-Mahrouhi, who is joining us from Cairo on this story. Adel, can you tell us more about these two devices and the loss of the officer's life trying to defuse one of them?
It comes as security measures intensifies and is on the highest alert. As you said, Egypt today marks the Christmas Eve. The Coptic Egyptian Christmas is held on January 7, and the celebrations start today. What has happened, basically, as you briefly mentioned, is that a suspicious bag was found on a rooftop at a slum area on the outskirts of Cairo. There was a church around the neighborhood, and when the bag has been noticed by some residents, they immediately notified an Islamic preacher in the region who on his term has contacted the police. Approaching and confirmed that's an improvised explosive device, the bomb squad officer quickly tried to intervene and try to defuse one of the bombs that were found. On his attempt, as you've mentioned, also the bomb detonated and he passed away, and a couple others have been injured. Now, the fears were mainly because such explosive devices would be on rooftops and may be thrown during the festive day, which is tonight. It comes also at a time where the Egyptian president is getting ready in a few hours to inaugurate and to witness the inauguration of the biggest Coptic cathedral that the state has built in its new administrative capital, an extension of Cairo, and where the presidency and the government is expected to move in the coming few years.
And Adel, what's being done about security ahead of these Christmas celebrations by the Orthodox Church?
The security measures are extremely at its highest level here in Egypt, both on the police level and the armed forces level. Buffer zones have been created, roads around churches have been blocked. Every single church has been greatly protected. And that's why actually no civilians were hurt in Saturday's bomb. What was actually happening is it was part of the screening process in the area. That's why there was immediate security response when the device was found. And it's kind of the alert status that Egypt wants to see and is holding on the ground. But because of such devices they're very primitively made, they're improvised and very small in magnitude. So anyone from any group who can prepare these explosives at home or in any hidden warehouses, which are usually on the outskirts of the Egyptian capital, it is easily, they can easily throw it towards such celebrations. But with the current security measures, it is very unlikely to see such an explosive device get inside a church like what we've seen in the previous years during the same season.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. That was CGTN's Adel Al-Mahrouhi. On January the 7th dates back to 1582, when astronomers noticed a mistake in calculating the length of the Greek solar year. Yasser Hakim looks at the countdown to celebrations in Cairo.
The country is bracing for the Coptic Christmas. While most Christians celebrate Christmas on the 25th of December every year, for Coptic Christians, mainly in Egypt and Russia, it's January 7th.
According to the Eastern calendar, the 7th of January is the birth of Jesus, and it's Christmas for the Orthodox Christians. For the Evangelical, it's the 4th. As for the Western calendar, they celebrate Christmas on the 25th of December. At the end, we all enjoy the festivities from the 25th of December till the 7th of January.
The rituals include praying and fasting for a certain period of time.
We fast for 43 days, but it's light fasting, where we eat vegan food and are allowed fish too. On the night of the 7th of January, we go to church for the Mass, and then we break the fast and begin celebrations.
Security is being revamped around most churches. Coptic Christians have been targeted by terrorist groups during the festive period in the last few years. More than 300,000 policemen have been deployed to ensure safe proceedings this year.
We can clearly feel the strong security presence for the Christmas, not only in this church but around all churches we visited and the surrounding areas. It's comforting, and we are sure we will enjoy the Christmas this year.
And in a sign of solidarity, many Muslims have announced they will be attending the Mass to share the celebrations with their Christian friends. The festivities this year will be unique, as Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi will be inaugurating the largest Orthodox cathedral in the Middle East at the new administrative capital, and it will host this year's Mass as well. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, returning to our top story and the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit to Africa, he said it's his country's hope that the African Union will continue playing its role in the development of Africa. Wang Yi also said that he hopes Africa will gain real economic and political independence. As CGTN's Giram Chala now reports, China financed and built a service centre that has been officially inaugurated.
Following up the progress made based on the FOCAC-Beijing summit is one of the main reasons why Mr. Wang Yi came to Africa this time. On his meeting with AU Commission Chairperson Moussa Faki Mahamat, Yi said China is dedicated to build Africa's capacity.
We are happy to see that African integration is gaining ground, and we hope that China will be able to contribute more towards peace, security and integration in Africa.
Last year, AUC Chair Moussa Faki Mahamat had 2 high-level visits to China. Those visits, according to analysts, have contributed in further strengthening the China-AU strategic cooperation. The African Union now has a representative office in Beijing. Mahamat appreciated China's support for the Africa Standby Force.
$100 million in assurance has been granted to this force, and $30 million in equipment has already been received by Africa at the Douala Logistics Depot. This support of China is most welcome in order to help us face the multifaceted threats of terrorism and trafficking and stopping transnational crimes.
Continuing its tangible support for Africa, China has built and handed over this multi-million-dollar service center to the African Union Commission. Wang Yi and Moussa Faki Mahamat have officially opened the facility. It is said the center will help significantly boost AUC's performance.
Our cooperation is very strong, very dense, multifaceted and effective. I believe that our common concern is to deepen and strengthen it further.
Wang Yi, on his part, has expressed China's hopes for Africa.
We hope that Africa will gain complete economic independence, and as much as possible, we will make the necessary efforts in order to build the capacities of the African Union, hoping that the organization will continue to be able to play its role in the development of the African continent.
The China-Africa ties is exemplary. That's according to experts. It's exemplary for the fact that, apart from theoretical agreements, it has a lot on the ground delivered between the two sides. Now, emboldened by the achievements, both China and the continent have agreed to further bolster their ties. Group Dara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
We're going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including... We update you on the anxiety building up in DR Congo amid a delay in presidential poll results. And US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo heading to Egypt, Saudi Arabia and other Middle Eastern countries.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. My home country lies at the foot of Africa, the southernmost tip of our beautiful continent, and the unique point at which two great oceans meet. Now on a clear day in Cape Town, you can just make out Robben Island, the place where Nelson Mandela was jailed for so long. South Africa has changed so much in the years since then, but it is this country's history that shaped me and took me into reporting. I'm inspired by Africa's men and women of courage. It's the everyday hero who brings out my passion. The creatives, the decision makers, the risk takers who are shaping a bright African future. I see them in Cape Town. I see them in the pulsating city of Johannesburg. I see them across the continent, and I know our time has come.
CGTN is a platform where African voices can speak for themselves and take their stories to the world. My name is Lindy Mtongana, and I'm a news anchor and reporter for CGTN.
Preliminary results from the Democratic Republic of Congo's tumultuous presidential election have been delayed past Sunday's deadline. Fears are growing that disputes and delays could spark the kind of violence seen after the 2006 and 2011 elections. Here's more on the situation in this Central African nation.
The Democratic Republic of Congo was on edge. The result from a crucial presidential election was delayed again, and the specific date for the results revealing was unknown. The original December 30th vote saw 21 candidates run to replace current President Joseph Kabila, who has ruled the country for almost 18 years. Officials say that the results will come out only next week, yet influential Catholic Church says there was a clear winner of Sunday's presidential election. Among the front-runners were Kabila's hand-picked successor, Emmanuel Ramazani Shadary, and two opposition candidates, veteran heavyweight Felix Tshisekedi and newcomer Marty Fayulu. Shadary is a former interior minister and Kabila's loyalist. He was hit by European Union sanctions for his role in the violent suppression of opposition protests in 2017. Tshisekedi is head of the main opposition union for Democracy and Social Progress Party and the son of his late founder, who has promised to make the fight against poverty his priority. Fayulu is a former oil executive and has promised a dignified and prosperous Congo. Mr. Kabila had been due to step down 2 years ago, but managed to cling on to power, sparking widespread protests and left dozens killed, and tensions over the lengthy counting process due to the repeated delays of vote are mounting. Although officials cite the reason for delay is due to the Ebola outbreak, experts says the move could further jeopardizes the election's credibility.
1.2 million voters won't be able to vote until March. But as we heard, the results of the presidential elections are going to be announced in January, and the president is going to be sworn in January. So 1.2 million voters out of 40 million voters, meaning 3% of the electorate, are not going to be able to choose their president. The credibility of the elections has been put in question because of everything that has happened today.
Fears of the results could be manipulated to install Kabila-backed Shadary in power, Stu Hunning, and the ruling coalition all say their candidates have won. This mineral-rich country has never known a peaceful transition of power since independence from Belgium in 1960. This time's political stewardship is at stake. Fang Xuan, CGTN.
Police in Madagascar have clashed yet again with supporters of Marc Ravalomanana, the loser in last month's runoff presidential election. Ravalomanana is accusing his rival, Andry Rajoelina, who was declared the provisional winner, of rigging the elections. As the country waits on the court to announce the final results on January the 8th, hundreds of Ravalomanana's supporters have defied a ban to demonstrate and have been protesting in the streets of the capital Antananarivo. Rajoelina won nearly 56% of the vote, while Ravalomanana took slightly over 44% of the runoff election. Police have been using tear gas to disperse protesters. Reports claim that several arrests have been made, with supporters vowing to keep up their protests.
We were sprayed with tear gas while we were praying. That is why we are complaining and asking the entire Malagasy population to come and demonstrate with us, because the country is at its lowest and we are being colonized once again, and the people will never accept it.
We will not accept it no matter what happens to us, even if it kills us, because it is our vote and we do not want it to be hijacked. And what is happening is being driven from the outside, and we admit that these are the French.
They didn't file a permit with the police headquarters, so it's an illegal demonstration.
To Tunisia now, where President Beji Caid Essebsi has declared a state of emergency from the 6th of January to the 4th of February 2019. The country's leader took the decision after meeting with the High Security Council. Tunisia has faced several terror attacks since 2015.
Tunisian President Beji Caid Essebsi has declared the state of emergency for one additional month throughout the country.
The security forces are ready to protect citizens as well as the public and private properties. We are grateful to our sons and daughters for their remarkable effort in guaranteeing security.
The country's premier visited the Interior Ministry's Central Command this week. Youssef Al-Shahid noted that this state is ready to respond to any threat.
All the logistical and human needs have been provided by the state. The police, the National Army and the customs services are on alert on the borders and in the cities to fight terrorism and to combat crime.
A state of emergency has been declared since November 2015, following an ISIL terrorist attack on a presidential guard bus in downtown Tunis. A group of lawyers and civil society activists said that the president's decision is unconstitutional.
The state of emergency cannot be extended indeterminately. This is against the constitution. It is imposed in extreme conditions while the security situation has improved across the country. There is no national emergency or imminent terror threat.
Beji Caid Essebsi chaired a cabinet meeting at the Carthage Palace, during which the draft law on the organization of the state of emergency was examined. The National Security Council has decided to examine this draft law in depth, particularly as regards guarantees and judicial control.
The Tunisian president said that the one-month extension measure comes after consultation with the Prime Minister and the Speaker of the House of the People's Representatives, pending the adoption by Parliament of the draft law on the organization of the state of emergency. Aden Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Mali's President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta has visited the graves of 37 villagers killed during a New Year's Day massacre blamed on warring communities. Residents have blamed traditional Dogon herders for the attack. The UN says women and children also died in a village of Fulani herders in the latest violence between the two groups. 7 people were arrested a day after armed men attacked the village. Mali army forces were sent to the scene after the massacre and also went into Boboso village near to the Burkina Faso border. The UN says more than 500 people were killed in violence in the area in 2018.
We have come to tell you that the Malian state is with you. We offer the condolences of the nation.
On to Somalia now, and there are concerns that a reduction in US aerial strikes will affect the Horn of Africa nation's war on terror. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilou updates us from Mogadishu on the impact of a US operation scaled down.
The U.S. Army has denied media reports indicating Washington's plans to reduce its military operations here in Somalia. The report, first published by U.S. media outlets citing two senior American government officials, said the move was reached after airstrikes neutralized a number of the militant group's senior operatives. Washington has about 500 military personnel in the Horn of Africa nation, assisting African Union troops, AMISOM and Somali forces in battling Al-Shabaab and pro-ISIL militants. Pentagon has increased its aerial offensive against the groups in Somalia since US President Donald Trump took office last year. The strikes went from 15 in 2016 to 47 in 2018. A strike last week also killed 10 militants southwest of Mogadishu, the first in 2019. Mogadishu largely relies on US counter-terrorism strategy in the country that it says has helped degrade Al-Qaeda's most powerful ally in the African continent. The US military has also mentored a special unit of the Somali army known as Danab that has proved effective in the war on terror. In December, it launched a daring raid on an Al-Shabaab bomb-making factory, killing 30 militants, including high-value targets and potential suicide bombers. Foreign troops continue to allow Mogadishu to exert its authority all across the country. A new year offensive is underway to dislodge the militant group Al-Shabaab from the Middle Juba region, its last remaining bastion. Mogadishu says it hopes to weaken the group after seizing its last remaining stronghold. Abdulaziz Bilou, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is heading to Egypt, Saudi Arabia and several other countries in the Middle East next week. The Trump administration is facing pressure from the US Congress to distance itself from Saudi Arabia over the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Our correspondent Giles Gibson is in Washington and has more.
CBS News says that the Egyptian ambassador to the US contacted the team that produces 60 Minutes shortly after they interviewed President Sisi. The network also says that the Egyptian government doesn't want sections about jailed political opponents and quotes a massacre of 800 civilians when Sisi was defense minister to be aired. Now, CBS isn't backing down in this dispute. They say that they will air the full interview on Sunday evening local time here in Washington. And at this stage, we haven't had any comment from the Egyptian government about this entire dispute. Meanwhile, the optics of Secretary Pompeo's visit to Riyadh in Saudi Arabia will be watched extremely closely around the world. According to a statement from the State Department, Secretary Pompeo will meet with Saudi leaders. But the big question is, will that include Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman? Just last month here in Washington, the US Senate actually passed a resolution saying that it believes Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is responsible for the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. The Saudis, for their part, they've blamed the death of the US-based journalist Jamal Khashoggi in Istanbul on what they call a rogue operation. As well as travelling to Saudi Arabia and Egypt, Secretary Pompeo is also travelling to 6 other countries in the Middle East, including the United Arab Emirates, where he'll be discussing the conflict that's currently going on in Yemen. Giles Gibson, CGTN, Washington.
Meanwhile, the United States National Security Advisor John Bolton has arrived in Israel. He's expected to hold talks with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday and is later expected in Ankara to meet Turkey's president.
U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton meets Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem on Sunday. After that, he's off to Ankara to meet Turkey's president. In both places, the agenda is focused on what the White House says will be a, quote, deliberate and coordinated U.S. troop drawdown in Syria. That's an about-face from mere weeks ago when President Trump announced that thousands of U.S. military personnel will immediately leave Syria and Afghanistan. The announcement prompted resignations from U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis and U.S. anti-ISIL envoy Brett McGurk, and spread alarm throughout the Middle East over the likelihood of a revitalized ISIL resurfacing in the vacuum left behind by the United States. Israel's strained relations with Russia and Iran's increasing presence in Syria will factor into Sunday's talks with Bolton.
This might increase the Russian and the Iranian motivation to limit the Israeli capabilities or options of maneuvering in Syria.
In a phone talk Friday with Russia's President Vladimir Putin, Prime Minister Netanyahu says he confirmed Russia-Israel coordination inside Syria. Bolton's meetings are synchronized with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's 8-country Mideast tour. Both rounds are being termed reassurance visits. Stephanie Fried, CGTN, Tel Aviv.
A recap of our top stories now. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is now in Gambia for his traditional New Year tour in Africa. Calling China his country's most important partner, Gambian President Adama Barrow has vowed to build closer bilateral ties. Wang expressed appreciation for Gambia's reaffirmed stance on the One China policy and China's willingness to build mutual trust with the West African country. He said the two sides should firmly support each other on issues concerning their respective core interests. An Egyptian police officer has been killed while attempting to defuse a bomb found outside a Coptic Christian church. Security forces said the device was one of two found inside a bag on a nearby rooftop. 2 other policemen and an onlooker were also injured when the device exploded. The attack comes ahead of Egypt's Christian celebration of the Coptic Christmas. So far, no group has claimed responsibility. Preliminary results from the Democratic Republic of Congo's tumultuous presidential election have been delayed past Sunday's deadline. Fears are growing that disputes and delays could spark the kind of violence seen after the 2006 and 2011 elections. The December the 30th vote saw 21 candidates seeking to replace current President Joseph Kabila, who has ruled the country for almost 18 years. And U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is heading to Egypt, Saudi Arabia and several other countries in the Middle East next week. The Trump administration is facing pressure from the U.S. Congress to distance itself from Saudi Arabia over the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The State Department said in a statement that Secretary Pompeo will meet with Saudi leaders. And those are the main stories that we are covering. Well, we are going to a short break now. We've got all the business news coming up, including the economic impact of the US government shutdown. We take a look.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You got to get out, go there, and you find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
US President Donald Trump has threatened to use emergency powers to build his border wall without congressional approval. But will such a move solve the problem or bring more legal challenges? Well, the partial government shutdown has entered its third week, with both sides standing firm. Vice President Pence has led another round of talks but failed to break the deadlock. He tweeted that discussions will continue on Sunday. CGTN's Toby Muse has more.
The effects are starting to be felt across the country. A spate of airport security workers are calling in sick, with union representatives blaming the shutdown. The TSA says that wait times to get through security checkpoints are still normal, but they could rise. And some wonder if this drags on, if flight safety could be affected. National parks funded by the federal government are seeing vandalism and trash accumulate as workers are no longer there to monitor visitors. 3 people have died in the parks since the shutdown began last year. Expected pay raises for senior government officials, including the vice president, have been frozen. Federal workers' unions say their members are facing hardship as they pay rent and buy groceries but live without a paycheck.
As a contractor, I'm in an interesting position that, unlike an employee of the federal government, I'm not allowed to work and I will not get back pay. I'm forced to use all my vacation time and then I'm put on leave without pay.
But to be clear, most workers will receive back pay once the shutdown ends. The reason for this shutdown is President Donald Trump's demand for around $5 billion for a wall along the border with Mexico. A wall, let's remember, he promised Mexico would pay for. The Democrats are refusing to give him that funding, opposing the wall. Some senior conservative voices have threatened to abandon Trump if he caves on the wall, and Democrat voters are urging their leaders not to let Trump win. But someone is going to have to compromise. The question is who and when. Toby Muse, CGTN, Washington.
A longer version of China's fastest bullet train, the Fuxing, has started running between Beijing and Shanghai. The train has a maximum speed of 350 kilometers per hour and 17 carriages. That's 1 carriage longer than other Fuxing trains. The new train measures nearly 440 meters long and can seat over 1,200 people. That's over 7% more than the other trains. Meanwhile, to get ready for the upcoming Spring Festival travel peak, railway authorities have adopted a new national operational schedule. That's effective Sunday. More bullet trains will be running in the daytime. The high-speed train's capacity is expected to be raised by 9%. A Japanese sushi tycoon has paid over $3 million for a giant tuna in a record New Year auction at Tokyo's fish market. Bidding stopped at over 330 million yen for the nearly 300-kilogram fish. Kiyoshi Kimura, who calls himself the Tuna King, had the winning bid. He says the price was higher than expected. The enormous bluefin tuna was caught off Japan's northern coast. It's an endangered species due to high demand. Uganda has increased its exports over the past year by over $350 million. Data from the Bank of Uganda shows the value of exports rose from about $3.2 billion in the 2016-17 fiscal year to just over $3.5 billion in the following fiscal year. The growth is partly driven by the increasing reliance on Uganda for food supplies by the region, as CGTN's Michael Beleke reports.
Thomas Yiga prepares a consignment for export. Fresh foods, fruits and vegetables now comprise of Uganda's biggest export products in terms of volumes.
What gives us an advantage is that our products are best or are good compared to what other countries produce.
Yiga exports much of his fruits and vegetables to the European Union, Canada, the UK and recently the Middle East.
We have the demands that we can't satisfy. For example, in Dubai, they need a lot of avocados. We take Oman, generally. We have Oman, Bahrain, and some other countries in the Middle East. So it's a growing market, and the exports generally are growing.
Other key export products, according to figures from Bank of Uganda, include coffee, tea, sorghum, soap, vegetable oil, and fish. Despite the challenges of insecurity in South Sudan, the DR Congo and Burundi, Uganda is registering a significant increase in regional trade, largely with the East African Community partner states. Uganda is selling much of its corn and beans to its neighbors. The growth, according to trade experts, signifies the importance of regional integration.
The EAC and COMESA, the regional market, has become strong for us. Two, that not only is it taking food and primary products, but we're exporting manufactured products.
Trade experts say the export of value-added products is creating more jobs for locals, but also earning the country more money. Uganda is also looking to tap into new markets, such as China, to promote non-food products like tourism.
Over the last 30 years and more, China has gotten more than 400 million people out of poverty. So the incomes have risen. And when incomes rise, this is an opportunity to also begin to travel, to go and relax and chill. And Uganda is one of the countries you want to come and chill in.
However, as exports grow, Uganda's import bill remains significantly high, largely for the import of raw materials, but also cheap alternatives to locally manufactured products. But for exporters like Thomas Yiga, keeping the quality of their products is key in penetrating and maintaining their export markets. Michael Beleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
We are going to a short break. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including we bring you the inspirational accomplishments of a young writer in Tunisia.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
In Tunisia, a young writer has become an icon in the North African state. He's found fame and fortune after publishing novels and tales in French. Amira has won several prestigious awards and he now dreams of a Booker Prize.
Amir al-Fihri is a 14-year-old genius writer. He has published 4 books, which have earned, in 2 years, 25 international literary awards. Amir has been appointed by French President Emmanuel Macron as a Francophonie ambassador in the world.
The first one that I won when I was 7 years old was the contest of the UNESCO and Alexo organized in New York by the United Nations. It's really a great pleasure to be with all those people who are participating on this contest, who are sending stories, and these stories are read by men and women that really participated in the world literature.
Amir is in Tunis to present his new book entitled Harassment. This moving novel tells the story of Alex, a precocious boy who was victim during his schooling in Tunisia of harassment by his classmates who misunderstood the kid's talent. Amir is signing the book for young and old readers.
It's one of the best books I have read. The novel tells the story of Amir, who survived physical harassment. He was more intelligent, disciplined and self-confident than his young classmates.
Amir is a good example. His success story inspires millions of young people in the world.
Amir will sign a convention with Tunisian President Beji Qaid al-Sibsi. It consists of the translation of his book into Arabic. The young writer plans to build schools for children in conflict zones and disadvantaged regions.
The benefits would go to build schools, for example, in regions in Iraq where we have war, or in Syria, or all over the world where children do not have access to education. Because I think that the beginning of everything for every child is the education.
Amir believes that every child is gifted. The Tunisian writer urges parents and teachers to encourage children to read and write or to reveal any other talent.
Amir plans to publish new books this year. He dreams of a Booker Prize. The young man's tales will be translated into English and other languages in order to reach an international readership. Abdel Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
All the sport coming up after the break, including... We bring you the story of South African footballer Percy Tau.
Africa